Good evening, everyone. I'm Shivani Kokate, a researcher at Prayas Energy Group. I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you at the event, dedicated to the memory of Girish Sant, the founder coordinator of Prayas Energy Group. Girish was a pioneering analyst and a passionate advocate of public interest oriented policies in the energy sector. His unexpected departure in 2012 left a void that we, as an organization and as individuals, strive to fill by carrying forward his legacy. While I did not have the privilege of knowing him personally, the diligent preservation of his memory and spirit by my colleagues at Prayas and friends of Girish has allowed me to understand the profound impact that he has had on those around him. A couple of days ago, I stumbled upon an article by writer activist Rebecca Solnit about radical change, almost being synonymous with slow change. She notes that the slowness of change requires an understanding that altering the status quo requires an unwavering commitment. And in this context, I feel like Girish's life becomes an embodiment of such a commitment, marked by a steadfast dedication to creating lasting change, influencing many, including myself. The Girish Sant Memorial is a celebration of this commitment to public interest work, thanks to the guidance and generous contribution of 25 friends and well-wishers of Girish. The initiative encompasses two main activities: the memorial event, which is now in its 12th edition, and the Girish Sant Young Researcher Fellowship. The memorial event has consistently featured many eminent public intellectuals and practitioners, covering a broad spectrum of subjects related to development, public policy, and governance. The format of the event, be it a lecture or a panel discussion, has evolved over the years. Our engaged audience, both present physically and more recently joining remotely, has significantly enriched these discussions with their thoughtful questions and comments. The Girish Sant Young Researcher Fellowship, the second key activity, is awarded to early career public spirited individuals, fostering promising research in the field of energy with a public centric approach. To date, we have had 5 such fellows, and their valuable work under the fellowship can be explored on our website. The call for the proposals for the same is regularly communicated through our website and social media handles. For those of you keen on delving deeper into our work in publications, please do check out our websites. And if you're interested in subscribing to our newsletters, do drop in your email IDs at the registration desk located on my right, just outside the exit. And before we commence our main program, a few announcements. The conversation between Dr. Vinay Kulkarni and Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar would be followed by a Q&A session. Volunteers are stationed around the hall. Please signal them to receive paper slips for your questions. Feel free to express your queries and questions in a language that you're comfortable with. And if you're okay, do include your name and affiliation on the same paper slip. Some of my colleagues will forward these questions to Dr. Vinay. And online participants, please do drop in your questions in the Q&A box. With that, I would like to hand over the proceedings to Dr. Vinay Kulkarni, who will introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar, setting the stage for what promises to be an exceptionally enriching discourse on epidemics in India. Thank you. Just to reiterate, in case you want to ask questions, we would prefer it if you do mention your name and affiliation. Thank you.
Good evening. I would first introduce Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar. We have been working together in the field of HIV/AIDS for last 3 decades or more, but we know each other as friends for last almost 25 years. He has been the previous director of infectious communicable diseases and epidemiology at ICMR. He was also director in charge in NARI, National AIDS Research Institute, as well as NIV. After his retirement, he is now CG Pandit Chair at ICMR. I think he has retired from there also. I don't know whether it is continuing or not. But uh, apart from that, we have all seen his face on the TV during our COVID epidemic, and he was probably the most reassuring uh, presence in the all 2.5 years of era. But apart from that, his career, how it started, where it has led him, and the national program. He has intense experience in HIV pandemic, HIV epidemic, then on to Zika, Nipah, COVID, and he is also a member of the expert committee of WHO, which looks at the emerging and origin of COVID and origin of emerging novel pathogens. But before we start this conversation, one disclaimer I would like to give is that we are going to talk about our journey, and it's not about documentation of that journey. So the chronology may differ somewhat. We are not documenting anything, so maybe it is a few years here and there, some of the events. But what we want to do, as this event is Girish Memorial event, is looking at the public health as such, public health policies, the structures, etc. And maybe through our dialogue, we would like to comment on that, because I feel, or we feel, that there are three components of any health response. One is the structures, which are the health systems, which could be public, private, etc. Other components of that. Then there is research, the scientific community, which looks at the different issues from a different perspective. And the third pole is the community. And I think no response ever can be complete without actually all three getting involved into that. But before actually starting the journey, today is exactly 2nd February, and in 2012 we lost Girish on this day. And why we have this program is basically because he was a great friend beyond anything. But the kind of warmth and the kind of energy he would transmit to everyone around him and make people believe and think ahead of what one can do for oneself. It need not be. So the whole journey of myself as well as our organization has never been with an intention that we want to make a change. So we were all individuals, we were all practitioners, we were all professionals. We wanted to be professionals and work in our own fields, but somehow we came into think that whatever we do should be for the betterment of the society, basically the disadvantaged people. And so when I was thinking about this program, actually I started with that memory, which was, we met Girish in 1986, and as a part of trekking and mountaineering. There was nothing, no energy, no HIV, nothing. Sanjeevani was on a Kamet expedition, and they became friends, and she came back with him, and then we became friends, and then this was the journey. But because I was talking about HIV at that time, we know that the first case of HIV in India was found somewhere around 1986, and it was 1986-87. So I was talking about HIV in a general way, that this is going to be a problem and kind of a thing. And I remember an event where he said immediately that if you are talking about it, come to IIT and talk to my friends about HIV. So we went there, and it was a very beautiful program because we were only 4 of us. Myself, Girish, one friend, and then the person who was there to put in the slides into that projector. So that was the kind of a project we had at that time. But actually that was the beginning, because we started talking about it. And I saw my first case in 1989 in my clinic. And I remember Sanjeevani said that you are talking about this for a long time, and we really did not believe you, because the narrative was that it is not going to come to India, it's not our problem, kind of a thing. But a small clinic where you see hardly any patients, The whole thing is every evening you have 4-5 patients, all of us gather in the night and have a katta there. And if you are having a patient in your clinic, then it must be a problem. And we should start talking about it. Again, that first case was very interesting because he was an elderly man, some 60, 65-year-old man who was suffering from some kind of a blood cancer kind of a thing. And he had received a blood transfusion some 5-6 years back in remote rural Maharashtra. Now, this is all unproven, but this was the story, and which was telling that we are talking that HIV is not going to be our problem. HIV probably is a problem of bad people. Our blood supply is not contaminated because we had not started screening the blood. And here I see a patient who probably received a blood transfusion with a contaminated blood in rural Maharashtra some 5-6 years back. And so it kind of started a journey. And what initially we could do was do a knowledge attitude practices study. And in 1990, there was a conference in Mumbai, the World Congress, and we presented that small paper there. And by this time, Prayas was not there. So now this is how I came here. And now I will like you to tell us how you kind of came in contact with HIV and took it forward.
Mine was a complete accident, complete. I was working in then known as Institute of Immunohematology in Mumbai. I had developed 2 cohorts of sickle cell disease. One was a community-based cohort which was in Valsad district. So I used to go to those small villages and work over that problem. And there was another one in Nagpur which was hospital-based cohort. So one time in 89 I used to go every 2 months in those areas. I went to Valsad, I worked in the field, I came back, and one of my friends, now perhaps I must take his name with lot of pride because Dr. Yazdi Italia received Padma Shri this year, who worked on sickle cell disease. He had a lab and a blood bank, and he was our liaison in that community-based cohort. I came back after the field work. He said, boss, तेरे लिए एक पेशेंट रखा हूँ. मेरे लिए क्या पेशेंट रखा तू? No, I'm sorry. Sometimes I will switch in Hindi.
No, that's okay.
Because this is how Italia mostly used to speak in Hindi. So he said, नहीं एक एड्स का पेशेंट है, देख के आ जा. अरे तू पागल हो गया? Why are you asking me to see a AIDS case? I don't know anything about AIDS. Otherwise, I am a pediatrician. So what will I know? He said, तू इसका क्यों फिक्र करता है? वो पेशेंट को घर में, वो गांव में से बाहर रखे हैं. He has been stigmatized, isolated, ostracized. Even if you go there as a doctor from Bombay, even if you don't know anything, he will be happy. And that's how I went to a village called as Mota Vakshipa. I was too tired. This is a story which actually occurred sometime around after 7 p.m. I left from Valsad, went to Mota Vakshipa. उसकी गाड़ी नीचे खड़ी है, बोला ठीक है. वहाँ गया. It was a very funny house. ऐसा first floor पे जाना पड़ता था, and instead of the hall, like we have chairs and table and things like that, you suddenly end up into a room where dining table is there. I don't know why and I don't know how. And these people were sitting there. The moment his wife knew, she called him. And I was as worried. The only paper that I had read till then was from J. Levy, who was one of the biggest scientists in those era, where he had written very recently in Blood, a hematology journal, which used to come to us, that HIV is present in all bodily fluids. That's about it. I remembered that part. He came, he was so happy. You know, he had paraparesis. You know, paraparesis is his both legs were not as strong. They had some weakness in terms of its power. So he came walking. He was very happy. He sat in front of me and started speaking. It was such an animated speech that his saliva used to fall on my face and my legs started shivering because this was the only paper that I had read, no? And I didn't know how to respond, and I was worried that his wife will be able to see that my knees are shivering, no? And it was a very torrid time. So what I did cleverly was put both my hands like this and tried to hold my knees from shivering, but that kept on continuing. So his wife asked me a question, Doctor, will you eat today? I said no. I had food because I was in the field. The truth was I wanted to eat, but I didn't have those guts. Then he suddenly said, she said, फिर क्या करेंगे डॉक्टर साहब, हमारा तो गुजराती वो रहता है अतिथि का वैसा. Well, I'll have a cup of tea. That was second piece of knowledge that I knew. If you boil, HIV is dead. That's about it. And then she came with the cup of tea. And I was shivering like crazy. And when she walked, she had a beautiful smile on her face. She came with the cup of tea. I looked at her and then I started thinking, this woman has not known anything about science. This woman perhaps is staying in the same room, sleeping in the same room. It is also possible they might be having sexual relations, protected or unprotected. But she can smile. I said, you are a bloody fool. Those were the exact words that I had in my mind. How can she smiles and your knees, they are shaking like crazy. The moment that thought came, my shivering stopped and I never looked back. I came back and Dr. Apte, who was incidentally from Pune, my director, I reported to him what I did for sickle cell disease work. He was my director at IIH. He said, then I told him I saw AIDS case. So he said, so far we are only doing testing because in ICMR we had only 4 labs where testing was being done for HIV. Would you like to start working? I said yes. So he looked at me. He was a typical Pune person. No? Though I shouldn't say this. Some people who I know who are related to him may feel offended. The reality was, he said, you go and talk to your wife. That was one curt sentence with which he came. I said, I have never discussed my professional issues with my wife. No, my wife is a homemaker. I don't discuss what I should be doing. No? He said, you look at me, look at my age. You will understand the reasons once you speak with your wife. So I went back home. I told my wife, I'm sorry if it is getting longer.
Okay.
No, but please indicate because otherwise I will never know.
We have time.
So when I went home, my brother was there. He had come. I was having a quarter in Worli. So my brother, and you know, I'm also as human as anybody is. Whatever you have, ज्याला आपण मराठीत म्हणतो ना खतखतत असतं मनामध्ये. Your first feeling is you want to go and throw it out, no? Whatever might happen. So I went home and I told my wife the moment she opened the door. I said, Dr. Apte asked this. I said, yes. But he said, I should talk to you. No, that was a bad feeling that I had in my mind. So my brother said, what's wrong? Have you fought with somebody? I said, no. He said, you are a pediatrician. You want to work in the field of HIV. It's adult medicine. So I said, how does it matter? Because you know that in Bombay that time there were only 3 people. No? One was Dr. Gilada, who was my classmate. Second was Dr. Maniyar, who was his PG teacher. Sapre incidentally was working with him. And I was the fourth one. I said, I would like to be fourth one. Everybody says this is not my work. No, somebody should say stop. No, I must do something. So let me be that kind of a person. My first response of my brother, which he may not like to hear if he was here right now, was, Acha, whenever you will start working, please tell me because I will come with my own razor. Because those were the days when the fear was. So I said, what is all this? No? So my wife said, let me think over for one day. And next day, in the evening, my elder daughter was born by then. So we waited for her to sleep. She was too small. And then I thought it could be unhealthy discussion. So I asked, what have you thought? She said, you work. And that shocked me because she is a homemaker and I am a earning member of my family. I said, I would like to know why you are saying, because it should not be out of a fear that he may do whatever he wants and I will have to somehow follow the thing. She told me one rustic principle. She said that we used to live on 7th floor. She said, let's assume there is a fire in this house. Do you know what will happen? The first thing will be you will rush to the lift's door. No? The moment you are reaching there, you will realize, Arey, my wife and my daughter, they are still behind. No, I must go back and try to bring them in. She said, the instinct that human beings have for self-preservation is so high that one cannot imagine and one may not accept. But the reality of life is, if as a medical person, you feel that you must work in the area, no, who am I to challenge your knowledge or understanding or whatever? To make the entire thing little lighter, I told her that I am happy you said yes, you told me the rationale, but the only one statement that I would make, because I had read JLAV, so I said, if I ever acquire HIV, please don't suspect my behaviors. That's about it. That's how I entered.
It's very interesting because what happened was, for me, I had no problem from the family or anything. I think we both started working on HIV in 1989. So this question never we discussed. We both were there, and as it happened in 1994, along with Girish, we three of us were the founder trustees of Prayas and established Prayas. But that incident I remember because the conference I mentioned, 1990, in Mumbai, the World AIDS Congress, we were there and there was a fellow from Africa who was wearing a t-shirt, I am HIV positive. And even that time's best of the scientists and virologists were shaking hands with him, some were not shaking hands with him and going to the basin and washing them. And I remember this incident that I shook hands and said that I know that it doesn't get transmitted through shaking hands, so it's fine. You know, it kinds of transcends you into some kind of a behavioral change in yourself. But after that, actually around 1994, when we were, that time we were seeing quite a few cases, and as you know, there was no treatment for anything. So everybody who would walk into the clinic with HIV, we knew that the person is going to die in a few years. But we were approached by quite a few non-governmental organizations and people, and we were preparing a slide set. And that time, even there was a number of patients coming in, and what we were seeing is there were about 40% of them were women. And what we were realizing that majority of them were married women, because ours was a private clinic in Maharashtra, in Pune. And so it was not that the most badly affected populations like sex workers or MSM were going to come to our clinic. It was the middle class kind of people, and 40% of them were women, and they were probably, because it was not, we are not doing any research, but they were probably infected from their husband. Whereas the narrative in the community was, the main message was avoid premarital and extramarital sex. So it was being linked with marriage. And what we felt is that it has to do about behaviors, it has nothing to do about marriage, because 40% of women, they are getting infected through marriage. Sometimes I used to say that marriage is the most important risk factor for Indian women to acquire HIV, because it was not extramarital or immorality. And so we are preparing that slide set, and in that we actually prepared that slide set, got converted, that got translated into multiple languages, and we took a stance that we would be talking about science, we would be talking about non moral, we won't take any moral stance on that, and we will talk about the natural processes in which one has to protect oneself. And I see Samar there, and he was a part of the one who actually guided us make those visuals, and that was our first steps into audio visual learning. You know, visual languages kaise hoti hai, that we were doing. At the same time, or around the same time, one of your first major research papers came out, in which you were studying, and you said that, well, there is enough incidence and prevalence of HIV in unmarried, married monogamous women. And I am alluding to that paper because, see, a doctor talking about someone, a small NGO talking about someone, something like a behaviors is a very small kind of a thing. But a person from a program comes out with a research, comes out with some kind of results and says, and I feel that that was a paper which actually changed the outlook of the program to look at women and the empowerment of women. So I would like you to tell us about that story.
Some things perhaps people may not know, and those who may come to know may criticize me. The reality was I was transferred. Suddenly one day we were in Calcutta for a meeting to start sentinel surveillance in India, something which became common over a period of time. And then my additional DG, he came in the afternoon, and during lunchtime he suddenly said, "Acha, tell me, where do your parents live?" I said, "They are in Pune." "So today I am transferring you to Pune." I said, "What?" He said, "You are transferred to Pune." I said, "Why should this happen?" "I am establishing NARI here, National AIDS Research Institute." I said, "I have never heard about it." He said, "No, yesterday afternoon I have inaugurated, and today I have reached here, so you should go." I refused. The reason was simple. For me, I had a big cohort of HIV infected people, and at that time my age was, I was young enough. My clients used to be partners, sex partners of all the film stars and such kind of people. I said, why do you want me to send and start working in Pune, which is known as the major center of Maharashtrian Samskruti? How could there be HIV in this particular city? I am very happy, I am doing great work here. He said, everybody who is working in the field of HIV in ICMR is being shifted directly to NARI. I refused. For 1 year I stayed back, saying I used to give all kinds of reasons. Then I came here. I was asked suddenly to work in Gadikhana. Gadikhana is a popular name here, but it is Dr. Kotnis, जो अमर कहानी वाले कोटनिस है, उनका प्री इंडिपेंडेंस क्लिनिक, एसटीडी क्लिनिक, वो तो कौलारू घर है, कौलारू clinic, all kinds of nonsense. There used to be bats colonies, 2 colonies, where their droppings used to fall on the staircase. You had to walk like this, avoiding everything. Suddenly my Dr. Rodriguez was my director. She said, "You start working in that clinic. You become clinic in charge." I said, "I don't understand STD. I am a pediatrician. I have never seen STIs. What do I do there?" She said, no, you start working. So then every weekend I used to go to GT, Bombay, because my wife was still located in Bombay, and learn from Dr. Hira, Dr. Maniyar, Sapre, Gilada. All of them used to have some kind of a clinic there to discuss cases, because those were early days. I learned, I came back. Then Gadikhana was more important a clinic because you had sex workers around, men having sex with men there, you had Hijada population, and as a STI clinic, initially BJ used to have more clientele. The moment I started working, I placed huge emphasis on the whole thing. We beat BJ Medical College very quickly in terms of number of patients that we used to get every day. We had close to about, if I recall, about 4,000 odd patients who were being followed every 3 months in Gadikhana. I was asked to go for in US to do MPH, Master of Public Health in Johns Hopkins University. And that was only because Dr. Tripathi is still here, he also may be remembering. It was because I asked them, I want to do pediatric AIDS management course, which was of 1 month in New Jersey. FXB, they said we are unable to provide travel fellowship. No? And those days my salary was 4,000 or 5,000 rupees or something like that. I couldn't have gone by myself. My boss said, no, I don't have money for travel grant. If you have to go there to do MPH. So I had 11 months of punishment that time when I started off for doing 1 month of course, no? After that. But that was a wrong thing. I learnt a lot. I think I must pay respect to Johns Hopkins. Whatever I have done, a large contribution is from Hopkins. There, Tom Quinn, who was the master at that time, he was one with whom we were collaborating. We had discussion, he suddenly said, let us compare your data of sex workers and women who don't report that they are sex workers. We analyzed, and the biggest surprise was 92% of these, they had a very high incidence as well as prevalence of HIV, even if they denied history of sex work. And we found 92% of them were married. So we wrote that paper. It was published in JAMA. But I can tell you one thing really. No? I was very scared because even then the government was conservative. No? I said people will say marriage is the risk. No? And there could be a huge backlash. But it didn't happen. We managed the whole thing, how to speak about it. Then this particular finding was used in entire Southeast Asia to destigmatize HIV. The reason was those days, no, if somebody is HIV infected, somebody who has STD, somebody who says I had sex with a sex worker or a man or whatever, उनको हम sinners बोलते थे, and nobody wanted to do anything. We used this data, positioned it very well. I was supported strongly by UNAIDS APIC. Those days it used to be Asia Pacific office was also there in Delhi. We used it to communicate that women who are innocent, no, otherwise, in quotes, no, not like, unlike sinners, they are getting infected. And that's how the entire process of looking at HIV changed over a period of time. And to my mind, it paved way for every intervention that we did, which we can discuss little later if you want.
Yeah.
Because I think I spoke longer.
Exactly at that point of time, I would say, like this, the whole thing goes parallel with the kind of stories that were coming out from the field, and which at the same time, apart from this science and what is happening, we had started building the movement around the rights of the people. So, for example, 1994-95, at Prayas we did a study on languages networking of men having sex with men, etc. At the same time, before that, about 3 or 4 years back, there was this case of Dominic D'Souza being incarcerated in Goa and then thrown in kind of a prison.
That happened far earlier.
1989-90 or 91.
Maybe earlier, because 1990, in the same World Congress, Dominic was a speaker.
Yeah.
And when he was released from the prison because of Anand Grover and Gilada's intervention, we had to support him. So there was one funding agency called as HIWAS. We approached them. We asked them to fund them. We never wanted to be part of that. No? So HIWAS funded them to create what was called as Positive People movement. No? It was an NGO. Dominic was a great force. It is unfortunate if Dominic would have had survived, perhaps things could have had happened faster. He was one of the excellent orators you could ever have. And he could communicate to anybody the pains that he went through. He acquired pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, as it was known then, in Goa. And in Goa Medical College, he was in ICU. Then all of us, none of us had money. All of us said, no, we were like charged pagal log. Na? So we said, we will admit him here. We'll bring him from there. So we brought him by flight. We negotiated with almost every hospital in Bombay, but the only hospital, that also I must place their name historically, was Breach Candy. No, Breach Candy said, because R.D. Lele actually intervened, Breach Candy said, we will allow you, but no staff will come from our side. You manage. And we were only 4 or 5 people. We didn't know how to manage PCP also. We read, and that time it used to be pentamidine nebulizers that we had to use. We managed to convince the airline to allow a pilot to come with that pentamidine nebulizer. Unfortunately, he died before that. Though it was coming, he died. And that was a bad shock for all of us. I remember when it came to his cremation, though he was a Christian, his will was that I should be cremated because I am HIV infected. And when we went for cremation, apart from 4 of us who used to do round of duties every 6 hours, nobody came to जे आपण म्हणतो ना खंदा देने को, ना? And that came as a shock. I remember we came out crying, all of us, that tomorrow if this happens to any of us, that we acquire and we die, at least as 4 persons, no, we should pledge that I will be there to provide that kind of support. That influenced life in a very strong way.
Yeah. Now this is because, as you said, there were hardly any hospitals who were admitting patients, looking at that, and if taking it from there, what I feel is that what we could do here is, I have worked in Jahangir Hospital, I have worked in Sanjeevan Hospital, Dinanath Hospital, creating that kind of a sense with your colleagues, because they were all afraid, and you were the only one who are saying that I am going to admit my patients in this hospital, etc. And then creating that atmosphere around helping other people to deal with these patients, learn together, because none of us were taught in our college days about HIV/AIDS, and so we all learned together, and we could do everything in these hospitals, including now cardiac surgery. Now it is a totally different thing, but even during that time, doing deliveries, surgeries was a major kind of a thing. Now looking at these women, actually there were no medicines, and medicines, we started knowing about these medicines a bit later, and then there was zidovudine, and then there were a few drugs, And I remember those days because we were knowing that this doesn't work for too long. Maybe initially we felt that it would work, it will cure, but ultimately we realized that it doesn't last that long. But in a way, everyone was struggling and was doing whatever one could, because we could not see the pain and illness, sickness, and the kind of death people would have with HIV. Even if we could postpone it by 6 months, hoping that something new would happen, we were doing that. And I also remember, and if I look back now, that whether we were doing right or wrong, but around 94, the first reports came in that if you give zidovudine to pregnant women and to the babies, the transmission to the babies could be prevented. And we had our pregnant women coming in at that time. And I remember those days when women would get it extremely costly. We had to procure it from underground, grey markets and kind of things. Treatments used to cost something like 25,000-30,000 rupees a month. And giving that zidovudine to the baby was a problem. I know that I will not tell today, but probably the days have come back, because right now we don't have pediatric formulations. But we used to take that tablet because the baby's dose would be 4 milligram, 5 milligram, the tablet would be 200 milligram. You crush it, go to a goldsmith, because the goldsmith would have that small kind of a scale and would give small packets of 4 milligrams and 2 milligrams and give to the babies. But the happiness we had at that time, seeing that a baby could be free of HIV infection and born to HIV infected mother, was really great. But at that point of time, when the medicine started coming in, and in 1996 at Vancouver, actually this triple drug regimen was declared that it was thought at that time that it would be terminating or it would be eliminating HIV in a few years, and then there would be a cure, which did not happen. But same time, we knew that the people in the poor countries could not afford it. So there is a lot of effort that has gone in from your side also about this medicines being procured, not only procured, manufactured in India, or encouraging those pharmaceuticals to prepare them, coming out with generics, and then advocating for generics all over the world. Because now we know that from people who would get medicines in black market at 40,000 rupees, India is one of the biggest exporter of generics for HIV or for all over the world, and saving so many people. So I would like to know the story about that period of your career.
I was in Hopkins, and everybody thought that I would stay back in US. But they didn't know I did not take my wife. I still cannot cook. I cannot do anything at home. But I decided I will go alone. The sole reason was I didn't want she or my children to hold those roots to stay in US. It's a nice country. But if I have to do anything, I should be doing in my own country rather than doing anything there. And while returning, everybody thought at Hopkins that I will take up some job in US, because Hopkins is number one for MPH as it is believed by Americans. No? Though Harvard may contest every time. If you ask me personally, I still also feel London School of Tropical Medicine perhaps is equally good. No? But I didn't stay back. So there was a huge pressure because I was sent on Fogarty Fellowship, where Dr. Bollinger was our main PI here. So he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I would go back and start building on what I have done." He said, "What?" I said, "I will take up a trial to reduce mother to child transmission." पण ते असतात ना बेभान पागल no logic in the mind, but I have to do this kind of mentality. So there was a new drug that was reported then was ritonavir. This is a story of 1995. Then I said I will use ritonavir to reduce the risk of transmission like they have done with zidovudine. So I came back and I wrote the proposal. When I wrote the proposal, my bosses, everybody said, "Arey, clinical trial, nobody is going to fund you." So I started searching people. Then I went to UNICEF. UNICEF said, "We don't fund anything. When it comes to trials is not our domain." Then I went back to NACO. Fortunately, one day there was opportunistic infections management guidelines meeting where Mr. Prasad Rao, who was the secretary, and PD, that time we used to call project director or
Project
something
director.
of NACO. He had come from Thailand, and during lunchtime, in the end, he came to me and he said, they used to call me as Dr. Ganga. Ganga, why should we not do? I have come from Bangkok. They released the zidovudine Bangkok regiment finding yesterday only. Maybe the world is not aware. CDC has done the trial. Should I invite CDC? That's typical Indian with perhaps self-esteem which needed to be justified. I said, this is time you should trust us. No? Why should you bring CDC? We have sufficient experience. So he said, give me the protocol in 7 days' time. I said, I will give you. But I don't want to work on an issue where the funding, if it doesn't come, I would waste 7 days of my life. He said, that is my job. No? We delivered the protocol in 7 days and zidovudine feasibility study came. And that was also with a political tone which we had to use. We did not say clinical trial. Because our worry was these are pregnant women. I was building up the study only on the married monogamous women's issue, because if you want to destigmatize the next population where perhaps you can provide drugs was pregnant women. No, because no politician could have stopped you. No, so, but then they said trial mat boliye. This was actually Prasad Rao's suggestion. Prasad Rao said don't use the word trial, say feasibility study. Then the activist will not run after you. Then you won't have a fear. You know, everybody might say, "Arey, pregnant women ko de rahe hain, wo bachcha mar gaya to," and then you get stuck. You know. So we started feasibility. Then we went for subsequently nevirapine study because it came handy. Though I was never in favor of that. Because by the time we could end nevirapine, we started getting those reports that it leads to development of drug resistance. But then I could not influence that policy. When the whole thing ended into a program, there were certain things that were happening. One thing that happened was, I won't take now names because those could be explosive. Somebody sent an email that we have reduced the dose of antiretroviral drugs by 50%. And I lost my cool. Those days emails were not so easy to see. I was sitting in front of the desktop. So I said that's good for you, you will earn money, but it will lead to irrational prescriptions which to my mind can damage the program. That fellow got bugged. No? He said, but then what should we do? The cost those days used to be around 40,000. So I said the only thing which we should do is at least we should start an education program on rational use of antiretroviral therapy for high volume prescribers. No? That's how the first program we took in Goa, where I was told in the evening by an ex-gentleman that they have received a notice from South African court. GSK had issued a notice that you are producing this generic drug. Either you stop, you cannot sell those drugs. So I just looked at him and I said, so? He said, we will have to stop production because this is a court order. So I said, see, the court order is saying you should not sell. No? You cannot market the drugs here in South Africa. But let's do one thing. We will not sell the drug, but it will be provided free of cost through some other agency which takes the drug. No, they could be outside South Africa. And that's how we beat the system then. And then on, I always had an advantage because we used to go for ECTG meetings where a US FDA's person used to come and speak on their perspective every year. I used to use that information to inform our people how we could position. That's how perhaps that evolved very strongly.
Yeah. So in 2000, I think for the first time, the Indian pharma came out with this triple combination, which brought down the cost to something like $1 a day. And by that time, Prayas, we had started our HIV clinic. And the important thing, probably what we were trying to do is, our client, as I said, clientele was from all over Maharashtra, but it was mainly the middle class people. And when these drugs became available and then the cost came down, we started getting it from the pharma and giving it cheaper to the patients, whatever at no loss, no profit. But even in those days, in 2000, 2001, 2, even this cost, only about 30-35% people could afford. And then came 2 or 3 things which I would like to come before we go to the national program for free ART. We talked about prevention of mother to child transmission, and we were dealing with so many pregnant women from this kind of class, and at the same time medicines were not available, and in the same years some of us were visiting Manavya, the orphanage for HIV infected children, and we used to go there just to play with children. And I must tell this story in short, but we met a child there. He was a very young, bright child whom we remember, like his name was Mahesh, and he actually succumbed to his disease, AIDS. And at that point of time, almost every week or every month, at least a child used to die because there were no medicines available. And Mahesh died, and as you mentioned about Dominic, this child we had to go to the crematorium and cremate. So 3 or 4 of us, Vijayata is Sanjeevani, me, and Vijayata is, I think, daughter-in-law was there. We were 4 of them. We thought that if it was possible to give the medicines even at that cost, we could have saved that child. It was possible. But there were so many children, not only in Manavya but outside, who were dying every time. And what we could do was, we said that we will try to do our best to prevent mother to child transmission. And in 2001, through another organization, we were approached by Elizabeth Glazer Pediatric AIDS Foundation. And we started our prevention of mother to child program at that time, in 2002. And it was really, really very difficult, because in first few years, the momentum was so slow that in first couple of years, we had only 3 hospitals. I think 2 of them I was working with them, Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital and Sanjeevan Hospital, and I think there was one on Lakshmi Road. Sane Guruji also hospital came a bit later, but there was Girish Godbole working there, and then one of our friends, and so it was the friends who were providing care there. Afterwards, Sane Guruji Hospital we approached and we could do that. But what the thought behind that was, if we want to have prevention of mother to child transmission, because we know that so much of obstetric care is being provided in private sector. Something might happen in the government sector, but who is going to look after the private sector? And we could expand that program, and I must say it was one of the largest programs we could ever do, because we, at the end of 2018, we had reached more than 2,500 facilities where we feel that we could mainstream the issue, that instead of having isolated hospitals kind of things which are providing care, every kind of a center was saying that we are ready to counsel, we are ready to give a comprehensive antenatal counseling to women, screen them. We had screened something like 15, 16 lakh women, 2,500 odd facilities, reached to more than 3,500 HIV infected women, and our transmission rates were really, really very low. And we could do that program. Now, having this kind of a program and having so much of data, we were able to publish also. And we remember those kind of interactions with the National Technical Resource Group. You mentioned about nevirapine, the data about nevirapine. The program was pushing us to say that you have to use the national protocol of single dose nevirapine. We were saying we are private, we are not going to use it, we will get the medicines from somewhere, but we would use it. Now, this kind of an advocacy, that effort, it needs to put the kind of perspectives that come from a private sector or from science into national programs takes, I know, quite a bit. Now, because you have dealt with so many PDs and directors, and you mentioned about Prasad Rao, and I think Prasad Rao was one of the exceptions because he also talked about the rights, he talked also about the empowerment of the disadvantaged because it is going to help. And then there were PDs who would say that, who actually in a meeting had told us that you are asking us to shift from single dose nevirapine, which is a problematic thing, but to save four more children, are you asking my program to spend crores of rupees or kind of thing. So you have seen a spectrum of people there. Now I would like to know your experience of that, because that gives us the perspective of how the systems work.
Systems I can say, but my big worry is I shouldn't take names. Because finally, when you remember things, you associate with people. But since we are talking about positive things, Prasad Rao was the first person who did what we call as PIPs at state level in NACP phase 2. And there we managed to push sex workers targeted intervention program. Targeted intervention program was very close to me because I can honestly say that in 1989, when I first went to Kamatipura, the red light area, I found the kind of horrible living condition that was there. No, there used to be 1.5 lakh estimated sex workers living there. And what kind of condition? No, you have, like you have in train 3 tires, you have perhaps 7, 8 tires. No, they live there, and very bad condition. And then I started feeling that if we have to make difference in the field of health, we have to look at socially disadvantaged populations and try to empower them, ensure that the government understands the responsibility, because there was no program that used to reach them. So NACP phase 2, we managed to push targeted intervention program. In the next NACP, we pushed mother to child transmission program. All that was possible because of a strong support that NACO gave or Prasad Rao actually provided to us. Now, is that easy to do? Is a question that you are asking. I have learned a lot of tricks of doing advocacy as I grew. No? Where to question, how to question, when to question. No? You cannot ask questions bluntly to the government, no, in a public domain. Because if you do that, they will become defensive and never work in that direction. Because any person, if I accuse any person sitting here that you have done this wrong, he will start explaining why he was right. No, so eventually what happens? There is no movement. No, both of us will remain in the same position. So there are tricks that you have to use. Can the system move very rapidly? Perhaps not. You have to think ours is a subcontinent. No? Any effort that you try to make for moving people from one to another direction can be as challenging. No, it's very easy to blame the government, no, that you are not doing this. You have a small population base in which you can do it, but that doesn't mean you can change the direction across in the country. So the movements are always slow. Do we think, no, that the leadership is likely to be negative all the time? No. They are also living in certain construct. No? That construct doesn't allow them to actually do whatever they feel like. So how do you do it? One of the tricks which we learned during empowerment experiences, which I did a lot in sex workers population or MSM or whoever, which perhaps even my ICMR may not be knowing, because those used to be some kind of underhand kind of activities, because that was not classical research as it fell under Nari. So I used to do those stuff on Saturdays and Sundays with one of my great friends. His name is Dr. Vijay Thakur. He had revolutionary kind of concepts, no. So empowerment exercises we started with sex workers. We almost reached there till BMGF came. That these will be community-led structural interventions where I should not be sitting because I am literate, my voice is stronger, therefore the NGO is working under me. No, as I am the boss, I am a gatekeeper. Our idea was gatekeepers should be they themselves. No? Sex workers should lead their own intervention. MSM should lead their own intervention. We reached thus far. Those days we didn't have money, so we used to hold these experiments in churches. So this is a reality. Because in churches they never used to ask us money, no? For a hall or whatever. And they used to provide rice and dal for everybody to eat. Now that was good enough for us. No, we went ahead, but BMGF came and the whole picture changed because the financing became so huge that even those women, no, they started moving away. They said, Acha, because there is one leader, no, among them. The leader starts feeling, if I get this project, I am going to get 22 lakh rupees. So for 1,000 sex workers. So that's a great thing for me. Could we dissuade that? We could not. There I think we failed miserably. Though one of my closest friends, no, Jana, who's known for his sex work related work, I was known more for PLHA related work. No, because we had divided those roles. No? Because you can't focus on everything. If you do everything, you'll never be successful anywhere. No? You tend to be diffused in your approaches. But Jana also failed. No? And आपण मराठीत म्हणतो ना ही खंत आम्हाला पण होती. तो कोविडमध्ये गेला जाईपर्यंतही म्हणजे whenever we used to meet, we used to feel sorry. कारण we had taken the movement to some area, it didn't happen. But we didn't know how to break that jinx because it's very difficult to fight against money, no? Money power that tends to come. Because every time when people, including those in system, when they will think ये क्या है चप्पल पहन के आने वाला आदमी इसके पास से तो कुछ मिलना ही नहीं है ना. You tend to lose a lot or the things get delayed. But are systems responsive? Yes. It depends on your ability to communicate technical information in the right way, question them right way. And why did I talk about community? We used community really well. Because I can ask question, no? But if the community says that why I am not getting this, it makes lot of sense. Because when I ask a question, they would say, इसका vested interest होगा. But when it comes from the community, the whole thing changes and they can shout at their best. To be honest, I hope people won't object because this is something which I have rarely talked about. We use press as well. Now, in the press, you identify right kind of motivated press people who have value-based approach and ask them to open up the issue, which you have to follow, whether through community, whether through your own questions, or even from research point of view. The best example I'll tell you how, which I think is another failure, which I used to, in the end, I used to shout at in the meetings also. When it came to test and treat, struggled for 5 years. Though everything was clean, no? Anybody who would read any article, they would say, "Achha, you have to start treatment." The evidence,
Absolutely, yes.
and it was generated within the country by NARI, by YRG Care, but it was very difficult to, there was so much of resistance. But one thing which I would definitely communicate, if you want to make a difference, the difference cannot be made with evidences that are generated from foreign collaborations. It has to be Indian study. Only Indian studies are accepted by, because I feel, when you confront with evidence to somebody who is in power, the first response will be, अच्छा ये तो अमेरिका में हुआ, अपने देश में क्या है, information ही नहीं है. So it is good to try and develop that evidence here. And what is most important, their third defense that tends to come is, अच्छा इसमें foreign collaborator था, वो उसका भी vested interest है, इसलिए वो generate हुआ. So if you do it as Indians, no, however small, however good, it makes sense, you can make a difference.
But then, you have come to a very different kind of a zone, not that was in my sequence. But at the same time,
You
like,
should have stopped me. No?
the thing is, we'll move to the other epidemics soon, but this whole thing is, being a researcher, being in research institutes, being with the government, my question to you is, yes, you slightly alluded to the thing that is the common perception that money has corrupted NGOs. And NGO and CBO, नहीं, that is everybody you talk to, अरे तुम NGO चलाते हो तो तुम्हारा अच्छा चलता रहेगा because you are getting a lot of funds for, nowadays there are no funds, but there was a period when, अरे you work in HIV, you must be getting a lot of funds because there is someone, and then everybody started saying that almost every NGO is corrupt and every CBO is corrupt. That's one side of it. Second thing is, suppose good intended, and you used a very nice word, I would like to mention that, because on which good institutions are built. One is values and second thing is ethics. If you have good values, good ethics, you could do good work. And I think that probably is the DNA which we have inherited from Girish and we have tried to inculcate in prayers. But is the environment, current environment in our country conducive to research? Even in research institutions, that is first thing. Whether in the universities and so many private universities that have come up. Third thing is organizations like us, which in a very small way have tried to build a research base and do a good research, nice research, but at the same time is the environment, the policy environment conducive to giving support to this kind of efforts, or there are different criteria? Now this is, I know it's a slightly volatile question, but
it's not a question of being volatile. I think when we say environment, it reflects social norms. When there are social norms, if you want to break and get out of that thing and try to change norms, it is as difficult as it can be, right? But can norms not be changed? Yes, they can be changed. Now again, I won't take name. No? Somebody who was my teacher, I recall in 1991, no? In one of the workshops, he's a big guy, and I am a research officer, Lallu. And in the teaching, I suddenly, during teaching, I was teaching on MSM. No? The first question he came, don't talk about men having sex with men. They are bekar people. No? Now that could have destroyed the whole setting. But I think it is up to us as to how you would strategize and communicate what you want to do and why you want to do and be convincing on the same. I don't think we should blame the environment, no, that the environment is unwilling to change or the current government doesn't listen to me. Everybody has ears, everybody has brain, everybody wants to survive. But how you are communicating? Are you challenging the government? They will not accept. No. So you have to use different means as a part of strategy to do advocacy. Now you look at the other aspect. No? Resistance always comes. Even in you, if you are thinking in terms of your own household, no, if you suddenly decide that everybody in the household should eat don pakaya lasun, no, will people ever accept? No, the environment has to be acted upon by different approaches. Now, is current environment, which Dr. Kulkarni asked, that is conducive for research? Yes, it is conducive for research. But how you package that? No, the same information when you package, how do you do that is a question that you should ask yourself. Everything is unpalatable if you look at it the wrong way. No? But every unpalatable, आपल्याकडे आपण we tend to consume कारल्याची भाजी. No? Not everybody likes it, but there is an art, no? How to reduce that bitterness that tends to exist. That packaging art I must have. Now on the second question which he raised was little difficult. Do we have youngsters who have that passion to make difference? I would say as the population is increasing, the survival pressures are increasing, they don't want to take any kind of risk. Is that because of values, wrong values that they have? No. Their values are equal to your own values. But it is just that this environmental pressure makes them bow down to acceptance of whatever situation tends to exist. But it is for the hard nuts like us to change them, try to promote that kind of thinking. If we don't do that, what have we done? For us, we will be satisfied with our own work. But have I created new group of people, whether it could be 1, 5 people, who would carry that candle forward or the flame forward to make a difference? I think that is possible because the population size which is against us, which leads to survival pressures, is also giving you a large population base of which you want 4 or 5 people, who could make a difference. So we should make attempts rather than feeling that we could be losers. A time will come, we will be as strong. That would be a dream that I would have for my own country. That it would be one environment which works towards welfare of everybody, remains as truthful and as free as anyone would like to have. But we have also got to remember that in life, what you believe is truth, we tend to have only in life a pursuit for truth. We do not know what is truth. Tomorrow, whatever news you hear, you must also keep in mind that one statement that may come from a researcher may also have hidden agenda. No? They may be trying to tell something which may be different than the truth. So to understand what is truth is something which is important. Unless you do it every time by yourself, you will not be able to believe on anybody. No? This is Kali Yuga, they say.
I think for want of time, I would stop from talking about HIV/AIDS, which was our both people's kind of common journey for a very long period. But not only many people, but I personally would also like to look back over last 5 to 7 years maybe, and I am sure that whatever I would like to ask and I would like you to answer is in retrospect. It's a hindsight. And that brings us to 3 points. One is Zika Nipah and how you manage that, handle that. Though not many people in this hall as well as who are listening would even look at that Zika Nipah as major threats. But I would like, before going to COVID, you talk about that because that is something about new epidemics, possible epidemics, emerging epidemics, and what could be the future.
In 2018, against my will, I had to shift to Delhi. For whatever reasons, I won't speak. I went there, joined in the month of January 2018. I was new. I was used to one single disease, HIV, and maybe associated, HIV associated illnesses. But as head ECD, every day I used to have, initially I remember, I used to find it difficult to even speak because somebody will come for visceral leishmaniasis, somebody will come for malaria. Now, majority of those issues I had never handled before. And I thought I was stabilizing sometime around April because I had to do a lot of reading. Suddenly Nipah hit. But I was lucky. I was lucky in the sense the health secretary of Kerala was one of my colleagues in NACO. For almost 3 months we worked together. Together in the sense, we used to say hi. So, and he used to hear me in the meeting. So he had some kind of inkling, how I think, what do I do. He had come to meet me for asking me for support for subnational certification of disease elimination targets in Kerala, which he wanted to do. So I had told him, yes, we will do it, don't worry. And in 7 days, I got a first message that first case of Nipah has been detected. Now Nipah is a horrible illness in the sense that almost 90% of the patients who acquire Nipah, especially in our part, they tend to succumb to that illness within a very short period of time, maybe about 5 to 7 days. How do you acquire Nipah? You acquire by touching the secretions, bodily secretions, and you get Nipah. Now just imagine that this used to occur sporadically around Bangladesh border in India. And it used to, when I say sporadic, is every 4 or 5 years there could be one outbreak. Because I think systems there on that side are also not strong. So even if deaths may have had occurred, they may not be reporting. No? This is transmitted mostly from bats. But at that time in Bangladesh border, it used to be pigs who used to transmit more often. And when this illness occurred, there was a big scare. The case that was reported, and the next day, we came to know that a soldier who had gone to Kozhikode, he died in Calcutta when he returned back. The fear was that there are different banned organizations in Kerala. So is this bioterrorism? and the fear increased like crazy. We didn't have anything. We fought like crazy because the chief minister then said, you go to your friend and you work with him and you don't do any other thing with even central government then. Because we know in India, if party changes, Kerala has CPM, here it was BJP, they didn't want to interact, so it used to come directly to me. In that entire 15 days episode, we did the kind of research which the world had never seen before. Must have had spent about 60 to 70 lakh rupees, but there was not a single piece of information which was not available with us, and I had managed to get one monoclonal antibody which was developed against Hendra virus in Australia. This virus could also have had been amenable. I managed to get that thing approved from US Army, which was US Army's product. Then it was kept in Australia. Australian people had to be pleaded, so I went through Australian embassy. And then to get a product, unapproved product, into India is a challenge in itself. But even everybody helped, the government system. But by the time that monoclonal antibody could come, our outbreak was over. So we could not use it. So I asked Serum that we didn't have so much of money. I said, there used to be one guy, Dr. Suresh Jadhav of Serum, and Adar Poonawalla was also gracious enough. I said, I don't have money. Can you produce this monoclonal antibody and keep it ready? So he said, but that could be expensive. But I said, India must become a leader. No? If we develop this particular antibody, if it works, I commit from the government side that India will provide this monoclonal antibody free of cost to any country which asks for monoclonal there. They agreed. But then all the efforts were done so well, even community mobilization, biosecurity training. No? We did it by sending few people to Bangladesh. We did exhaustive work within a very short period of time. The result was next year it occurred because bats tend to come to eat mango orchards, and there they pass urine after eating the fruit, and that's how by and large we get exposed as human beings. Next time when it occurred, the community movement, which was our strength, both, whether it was Rajiv Sadanandan or me, we managed to mobilize the community so well that next time it had only one case which occurred as Nipah's case, and that student, engineering student, did not die. That was a great success. It continues to remain a success story across. And when I tell people that I spent about 70 lakh rupees, they cannot believe me. No, they say we receive millions of dollars of grant, but we have the strength, we have to work over it. And then when I was happy in 2018, because this happened in the month of May and first week of June, sometime around October or November, we got a news that Zika infection has started in Jaipur. Zika is one infection which is transmitted through mosquitoes. If it infects pregnant woman, the risk is that the child will develop microcephaly, that is head size will be small and it will be mentally retarded. It doesn't have good diagnostic tests to pick it up straight away, because you have to do the test for a mild infection within 5 days. No? In India, nobody comes in 5 days if there is a mild infection. But the biggest challenge that I had in my mind was, so far in our country, we used to get imported cases. Somebody who has traveled to Brazil, he would come. But my scare was different. I said, if, just imagine that we cannot eradicate mosquitoes from our earth, our part of the world. If the infection settles here, like we have not been able to eradicate malaria, Zika will be such a terrible problem, and there will be so many children who would be born with mental retardation. So my first target was to prove whether Zika is actually established in India or not. Unfortunately, it is. We looked at those mosquitoes, we looked at human beings, the pregnant women, and we compared the virus. The virus was the same, which essentially means it will continue to remain as a threat. And as usual, I had unorthodox styles of administration. When Zika started, when we first detected, the first thing which I did was I went to my Director General, Dr. Bhargav. I told him, sir, we have first mover advantage, which I don't want to lose for my country. He said, what do you want to do? I said, Bharat Biotech has, in those days when it was occurring in Brazil, they had said that they have done phase 1 trial of Zika vaccine. I said, please allow me to speak with their boss. We will fund their trial, but then India's name will be bigger in the maps because we have developed the vaccine. But there was also misfortune. He agreed, we funded, but Zika is one infection that lasts for a short period of time, like COVID that you have seen, and then disappears. But in COVID it is easy because it is occurring in the other contiguous area. For Zika you cannot predict where would this outbreak occur again. If it was in Jaipur, the next place could be, let's say, just take any name, we would not know how to predict that part. It's like chikungunya. For chikungunya, it may occur today in Pune or Latur, and next day you will hear reports somewhere in North India. So we could not complete the trial, but we did excellent study with that.
Now you mentioned about that big thing. If we are running short of time, every interview should end with a rapid fire, I think. And before we take questions from someone, when I wanted to talk, and we could have gone on talking about COVID also, maybe what I would say is that is, as we are looking retrospectively, did we do right things, right time, right way? Is there any comparison between different kind of things and responses that happened all over the world? For example, Sweden responded differently, developing countries responded differently, developed countries responded differently. And if I have these three hypotheses that in India, the epidemic could have been different if we had stopped that virus coming into the country a bit earlier and not allowed those big things happening in early part of the day. Did we start the lockdown very early when there was less of virus and did not allow people to go their places, or we allowed them to be in places where there was COVID and then we let them go to their places when actually the unlockdown happened? There is a big thing saying that, well, more people have died because of your medicines and guidelines regarding remdesivir and kind of things. And was the response kind of right? And we did a study, and what we found a good positive note about is, again coming to the fact that in this period also there are two things which stand out, and our India's response is whatever semblance of public health systems in India we had, they got mobilized. And second thing, because of our work with HIV, whatever community based organizations had whatever infrastructure at ground level, they also got motivated, they also got activated on their own without even having money, and therefore messages could reach the people about everything. And whatever the data we are hearing about India's COVID, is it right or is it wrong? Because you are more famous now because of a great movie that has been made on the thing. But I'm not going to go into the controversy, but one of the promos says that पूरी इंडिया एक शमशान बन गया है. नहीं आप नहीं, वो फिल्म का प्रोमो सेज दैट पूरा इंडिया शमशान बन गया है. और we are told that well, India was not a shamshan because we have never counted our deaths. So now these are, I know, rapid fire questions, but it's up to you now, and then I take the questions from the audience.
The one thing which I can definitely say is India शमशान बन गया मैं तो कभी जिंदगी में बोला नहीं. Neither have I seen vaccine war. I haven't seen movies for last 20 years. I don't have that patience. There could be only dramatization. Now, did we do it right? See, it's easy to look back and say, oh, we could have done this little differently. Was that so easy? Perhaps not. Did we delay lockdown or did we do lockdown early? Why lockdown? There were all rights-based questions which people used to ask at that time, that you are depriving people of the livelihood per se. But I think they don't know the other side of the story. We did not have anything at that point in time. Please remember, if every citizen in the country would have had fever, we would not have paracetamol tablet to be given to them. That was the situation, because the actual drug, we call it as API, the powder that is used is actually coming from China. Now just imagine the fear that you have, that if people have fever, I can't provide paracetamol. It would not be sufficient for everybody. The disinfectants that you were using, were they there in adequate number? No. You look at PPE kits or masks, no? Were the masks available? There was nothing. Because China, at one point in time when they started their thing, they bought the production lines for next 2 months. No? So who's going to give you this? And just imagine if we would not have had gone for lockdown, how would we create all that? Even doing RT-PCR, the COVID test, no? For that we started with first laboratory in NIV. And then, I wish I could have shown a slide. No, if you actually look at it, there were only 35 labs in India. You have a respiratory infection which you want to reduce the transmission to others, but you need to first detect that infection, whether the test is positive. Then only you can isolate person. But if you don't have the test, what would you do? You will not believe those RT-PCR machines, when we were fighting at that time. In India, we could manage to buy only 35 RT-PCR machines, and at exorbitant cost, because no manufacturer had it. The entire world was bidding for everything that is used in COVID response. So it was tough. No. To a tune, I don't know how much should I reveal, but we have used Indian Air Force planes to bring large machines from outside, from developed countries. It was a very tough situation. So if you ask me, was that the right thing to do? Right, I would say yes. Was it an ideal thing to do? I would say no. But at the same time, if we would not have done it, perhaps many of us who are sitting here now would be sitting, their relatives would be sitting with their photographs in their mind. It was tough. Now, could we have gone for lockdown earlier? Perhaps not. If you ask me my thoughts, you could blame me for that also. My thought was China, South Korea, Japan, these were the three countries that perhaps had initial outbreaks as such. If you go back, MERS came, SARS came, both these infections, they managed to stop them at their own end. They never affected us very strongly. And I knew one thing, Chinese use lot of danda, so everybody listens to them, because there is military around. And therefore, the risk of spread, I thought would be comparatively lower. But we were completely taken aback. For a respiratory infection, you only need nidus of infection to enter into a small population. Then it propagates by itself. No amount of stopping air travel or any restriction would have had worked. It only delayed the outbreak to some extent. Now many people will feel, even I used to feel, I asked to one of the highest bureaucrats also of the country, why don't we stop the flights coming from China? It's not easy. He said, these are bilateral relations. One small mistake, you are going to antagonize one or the other country the worst way. Where did we fail? We failed when we started restrictions. One of the reasons why we failed was you can stop issuing visas to foreigners. You may perhaps try to ensure no other country person can come in. But India is such a large country with so high a mobility, you cannot stop an Indian who maybe, let's say, he has gone to Hong Kong. Now, how can you say, oh, you can't come? And how can I say he is not infected? No. So, if it was mostly our own population that brought the infection, and there was no way, because as a citizen, they have right to come back to their own country. No, nobody could have had stopped. So it was a tough time. Now, Dr. Kulkarni referred to 2-3 situations like Sweden, India, all others. No, everybody had small differences in their models. Sweden's was the poorest to my mind. Very strict kind of this thing was done. Even China, for that matter. China's economy is currently suffering because of COVID. There is no other reason, because they had very long lockdown. Same is true with Japan. Japan, they did not allow the people to visit Japan during that period for almost years altogether. But whose model is best? I think the choice can depend on the indicators that you can use. You look at the numbers of deaths that have occurred, perhaps we are still better off. But you look at the best part that we could achieve. We could mobilize the entire public health system. For the first time, we started adult vaccination program, which was very successful. First time India stepped in such a manner where we did not have any new vaccine development platform. That's how Bharat Biotech, we gave them virus proactively. We said you develop, and both, whether it is Poonawala's or Bharat Biotech, though people don't tell this story outside, when we called, I'm telling you the truth, that they said, क्या 200-400 करोड़ रुपया नुकसान ही होगा ना वैक्सीन बनाने में, देश के लिए करेंगे. Tell me whether such kind of approach is easily possible now. I can also tell you that every day there used to be a long queue of industrialists who used to come and say, I can do this for my country. Should I do this and should I provide it to you? I felt proud as an Indian citizen during that period. If you look at it the other way, ours is the only country which has come out strongly with a stronger economy post-COVID compared to others. Because for the first time I felt all Indians are Indians, they want to do something for people.
There are some questions from.
तुम्हाला विचारायला सांगा ना पहिले.
I'm just moderate. There are two questions from our friend from Sangli, Meena Seshu. Is it possible to end AIDS, or is it that just a political statement? And second thing is, any explanation as to why sex workers in brothels did not face the consequences of COVID-19 as the Yale and Harvard study predicted?
सेकंड क्वेश्चन आता मी मला ते आता द्यायला विसरून जाईल. नाही, सेकंड क्वेश्चन इफ आय टेक फर्स्ट. अच्छा, मीना शेषू इथं आली आहे का?
She is online.
Second question is easy. Why did they not face this issue as severely? That is mainly because you have to remember they are younger age group, people, women in younger age group. Whereas the rest of the population which was suffering was among those who were elderlies. No? Otherwise, even young people, they had very little morbidity or mortality. So sex workers survived in that. Now, whether such a study comes from Harvard or whoever, I think we have to use our own rationality and then say whether this is good or not. Mere, a study coming from XYZ organization doesn't make, we have to use our own senses. To tell you the truth, we were almost bullied by the world that India is going to lose so many people because you have a population density which is so high, your population size is so high. How do you do it? No, you look at even those Dharavi's examples if you want. No? That you wanted ventilated rooms. What ventilated room are you talking about in Dharavi? No? You cannot have that. But we survived because of our younger age groups really well and government's prudent actions. One question which I forgot to answer, did people die more due to guidelines? Not because of guidelines. It was misuse of guidelines. No, people started using steroids right and left. The moment a test comes out as positive, start giving. And today you have a major issue that you are handling is avascular necrosis of femur. No, it is so rampant among people who have received steroids. For remdesivir, we unnecessarily made hue and cry. No, though I cannot say for sure that it was a wrong behavior when people started buying remdesivir aggressively, keeping them in refrigerators. No, that's a human behavior. No? Perhaps it can come to any of us if there is a big scare. Just imagine that tomorrow you get a news that चावल मिलने वाला नहीं है एक महीने के बाद में. Everybody will scramble and keep the thing at home, stored at home. Is it possible to end AIDS? Theoretically, yes. Is that just a political statement? I don't think it is a political statement. Theoretically, it is possible. But the only flip side is we have tasted early success because of durable impact of antiretroviral therapy. It would be difficult to sustain the same momentum now onwards unless you mobilize the community. I believe any illness, if it has to be eliminated or eradicated, the sustainability is in the hands of people. And if they do it, we will even be able to stop AIDS.
I would say that probably if we have good medicines and if they work, we have already ended AIDS. What continues is HIV epidemic because no one would die of AIDS because one would survive for 70, 80 years and then.
But the numbers continue to be high. The total AIDS cases comes to around 100,000.
It was in lighter
Every
weight.
year.
But next question is from Suhas Kolekar also. I don't think she is in the hall. Is she? Online. In view of the climate crisis, will we face new viral epidemics? Do we have programs to train staff to address this? Where do we learn about such training programs and encourage youngsters to get trained?
This is one question. When I referred to Nipah infection, we went in a typical manner where even One Health surveillance, this is when you talk of climate change, the risk of interacting with animals, it tends to increase. Because if there is a flood, animals will try to take shelter in our houses. We may come in close contact, whatever. It's just a question of imagination and situations why it would happen. Now for that, if you want to fight against disease X, we call it as one which is yet to come, we don't know which organism will come. We need to have a good One Health surveillance. We did that in Kerala. Now the government has taken it very seriously and there is a One Health surveillance program that is being launched today. And at the same time, how communities should be mobilized is also being tested. So we should trust the government that things would happen. But does this mean that we will be able to handle whatever new virus or a bacteria that would come effectively? We have all the tools now. Now in India, we had only one type of vaccine which we could do, which was like polio-like vaccine, which is Covaxin, whole inactivated. Now, if you actually look at what we have every platform is being kept ready. The day any occurrence of new infection is reported, we are in a position to fight against it. And hopefully, we will do it effectively in a short period of time. But does this mean everybody should relax? Absolutely not. We have to worry about these infections that could come and prepare ourselves to fight against it. And that is happening as of now and it will happen. But to imagine that we will be able to mobilize communities quickly now is difficult only because people have developed that COVID fatigue. Now you talk to them on such health related issues, they may not agree so easily. So you will have to give them some time. You will find we will come back to the same stage.
There is another question from our friend of Prayas for a very long time, Veena Joshi. What would be the narrative for the civil society organization in the coming decades? Innovators or delivery agencies or allies of government, etc.?
One thing which I can say, one needs to be an ally. Mainly because government also tries to look at welfare of the population. As an NGO, one must always have the same principle. So one has to, it is like a jigsaw puzzle. You may have to fall into pieces and try to help both. The government should help NGOs, NGOs should help the government. But I am not very confident when it comes to how would NGOs look like over a period of time, because I think with artificial intelligence becoming so common, if you envision in next 2 to 3 years time, the impact is likely to be worse and unpredictable. Because human beings are more likely to get more isolated rather than working together towards a cause. Because you will find it difficult to, because we won't need you. There could be tools which are available to them, they can do whatever they want. So asking these people to come together for a cause will be a challenging issue over a period of time. And therefore, what would be its impact? I hope I I cannot make it, cannot say.
Okay. Any questions? Any more questions? Anyone from the audience? What is the community you are referring to which mobilized driving during each of the epidemics? Who do they consist of? So,
See,
broader
very-
definition of a community.
I know it is difficult to answer, but at the same time, I'll tell you, for anything that happens, there are different stakeholders in the community, right? Each one of them are mobilized with a specific purpose or a generic purpose. To give you an example, since it was Nipah specific response, why could we detect the first case on the very first day that the patient was admitted in a private hospital in 2019, that is in the second year of this Nipah outbreak? The sole reason was we had mobilized private sector, doctors, hospitals. We had mobilized all healthcare workers with a specific purpose to detect them early, right? When it comes to community mobilization, like the question is generic, what am I doing? People have to know that they should not eat the fruits like mangoes, pineapple, which is bitten by these bats. That is very difficult to do. But I'll give you an astounding example of Bangladesh. Do you know Bangladesh has managed to completely prevent this Nipah outbreak? And what is the tool that they have? What they do during this season, when the ripe fruits are there, they tell the community, please don't eat anything that has fallen down, or appears as half-bitten fruit. And the second thing that they do is they put nylon like काय म्हणतात त्याला? Nets, so that even if they come, the bat will not be able to eat. Look at the intervention. It is so simple. Anybody can do it. And that is the power of community mobilization. People can always do it. You must have heard a story of an outbreak that tends to occur every year, where children tend to die after consuming lychee. Japanese encephalitis-like illness. Why can't we think that this is completely preventable? But this happens because we are not efficiently mobilizing our community. We allow our children to go out and play and eat whatever comes to their mind while the parents are working in the lychee orchards. So the power of community is huge. How we use is a issue.
And in that sense, the definition of a community for a particular vulnerability to a particular infection would differ. But at the
Absolutely.
same time, there would be people who are vulnerable, not only vulnerable, the other people who have stakes in that, as we call as stakeholders, and they would form the community for that. Shilpa Karwande asked, what are 3 best and feasible strategies for pandemic preparedness in our public health system?
Pandemic preparedness, as I said, it will differ by levels of healthcare. You would perhaps require that there would be a periodic training of the healthcare workers. Second thing which we have to remember is we have to strengthen what we call as IDSP mechanisms, Integrated Disease Surveillance Program mechanisms. Third thing, this surveillance should be so effective and the time taken for the data received from the field to those who are different stakeholders in the game, no? Like a vaccine manufacturer, a drug manufacturer, the health system, the hospital systems, that must reach very fast. So if we do these three effectively, perhaps we should be able to handle things well.
Coming to the end, if there are no questions, I would say that one of the things which we mentioned in the last thing is basically looking at the values and ethics, because we say that surveillance should be there, data should be there, but the systems work in such a way that reporting false data is incentivized, because if you give a true data and if it is mentioned, then some lachan piche lag jata hai ki you go to the house, you do give the medicines, so the health system is kind of incentivized to give a false data. And we don't get good data, we don't have good data, and that's why we don't have good surveillance and we don't do anything. So it all basically starts from everyone who wants the data, who wants to give the answer to the analysis of that. That is the science. It is also the systems which should be ethical and committed to the cause and the community. And I think what would be your last few words?
What is most important is government has its own duties, but community should be the watchdog. No? Anything wrong that is being done, if it is coming from the system, community monitoring is going to become important. And hopefully it will happen. I think we need to remain optimistic and try and make small differences which all of us can make in any defined field, because India needs all of you to contribute one way or the other. ज्याला आपण खारीचा वाटा म्हणतो ना, सगळ्या जर खारींनी करायला सुरू केलं तर कुठल्या कुठं जाईल देश लगेच. पण प्रत्येकाने काहीतरी केलं पाहिजे देशासाठी. लेट अस कॉन्ट्रीब्यूट दॅट.
थँक्यू. थँक्यू. Girish comes for giving the vote of thanks.
Good evening. I am Ganesh from Prayas Health Group. It is my pleasure to give a vote of thanks. I would like to thank you, Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar, for sharing your perspective on epidemic in India. Also thanks to Dr. Vinay Kulkarni, our sir, for making the conversation insightful. I would like to thank DES Society for making this hall available for the event. Thank you, Mr. Rokde, for the hall arrangement. I would like to thank Mr. Aditya and his team for video and photo documentation of the event. Thank you, friends and supporters, well-wishers and donors for supporting all Girish Sant Memorial activities. And lastly, thanks to the wonderful audience attending this event online and offline. Thank you very much.